So I'm sitting in a new place, new country, new language, in a place that I have never visited before, knowing absolutely no one. And it's a very surreal experience. And thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, a theme that I'm kind of coming across both within myself and some clients and some people in my life is this feeling of getting it right or not getting it right, and how we're often, even if you look at kind of religious history, religious philosophy, there's kind of this conditioning of there's a man in the sky. This is at its most basic form, right? But there's a man in the sky that is going to tell you if you've been good or bad, if you're going to be praised or if you're going to be punished. But I've seen this cross also into the spiritual world, and the terminology is different, but you could say it's the universe. Oh, the universe is doing this to me. The universe is punishing me. I feel rejected by the universe, or I feel abandoned, or I feel pissed off, or I feel let down, or, what does this mean? Why did this happen? And there's this whole kind of love-hate relationship to the universe, and giving it a whole lot of power, and feeling like we're not in control, and feeling like we need to get it right or else we get it wrong. And if we get it wrong, then it's a mistake. And if it's a mistake, then it's bad. And therein lies the duality, right? Of good, bad, right, wrong, praise, punishment. When actually outside of this dualistic realm, that doesn't exist. So what I want to talk about and look into today is, what is this conditioning about needing to get it right? What is this conditioning about handing over so much of our power to some kind of external force, be it God or the universe or spirit or whatever it is? And it could, bring it into the micro, could be another person. So handing over our authority, handing over our creativity, handing over our sovereignty in a way, and our true power to be able to co-create. So it's a big topic. So let's see where it goes. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I'm going to begin by placing this in the context of my own personal experience with getting things right, or feeling like I'm not getting things right, and the whole experience that comes with that. So I would say 2024, because I've been so nomadic and moving around and having these different experiences and searching for a new home and having itineraries and Airbnb bookings and all of that. It's been the year of needing to make decisions. And I have known for a while now that decisions are something that are really hard for me. I don't have a lot of shame around things, but when it comes to making decisions, I do. And I think it's because it feels like a very difficult, overwhelming, sometimes anxiety-producing experience, and I feel very alone with it. Now, it could be related to the fact that I didn't grow up with my father or a constant father figure. And so you could say, well, I didn't have that masculine container to kind of create that safety so that a decision could be made without any too great of risk, right? And I'm an emotionally centered person. I'm in the emotional triad of the Enneagram. And I have found across the board that people that are in the emotional triad do have harder time making decisions. There's some other types, though, in the Enneagram that also struggle. So, and, you could look at astrology and that feeds in and who knows? There could be various reasons, right? But for me personally, it's something that I've never felt really supported in. It's always felt like a very lonely experience. And I've certainly felt the almost external shaming or judgment is maybe a more accurate word, or just not being understood. by the fact that it's hard. It's hard for me to make a decision because for some other people, they make decisions very quickly. Or I've been in a relationship with someone that makes very, very hasty, rash decisions. And in one way, I kind of admire the fact that like he could make really fast decisions and just do it, but he would lose attention to detail. And sometimes there were a lot of, you could call them mistakes or you could call them just inconveniences. It's not as efficient. It's not as, it's not as fluid as it could be. And so I'm looking at this like, well, what is the risk for me of feeling like I didn't get it right? And there's many different angles to that. But what I'm recognizing for myself, and of course this might be different for every person, is it comes down to what is going to be my experience. I realize that as I get older, especially, I really value what is my experience. So when I had made a very quick decision when I was booking my flights to Mexico, I really regret not having paid just like a few £100 more to take a direct flight. And instead I was like, okay, by the advice of someone else, it was like, just book it, just get it done, save the money, you can use it towards something else. And actually the irony is, firstly, it cost me so much of my energy. And secondly, it actually cost me money because I ended up having to get a visa just for the stopover. So it was all kind of ridiculous. Like it would have been so much more efficient, easeful, and not that much more money to just take the direct flight. So I'm recognizing that I really value what is my experience. Right now, I booked a place for a month and I booked it again because it was a couple €100 cheaper. And I'm now regretting that decision because of the experience that actually the place that was just a little bit, had one extra thing, especially that would have really brought me so much joy. It had a terrace, and I realized a terrace for me, like waking up and going out in the sunshine and stretching or sitting and just taking it in, I really, really value that. So I'm realizing that for me, not making the quote unquote right decision affects the way that I will feel, and therefore it will affect my experience. Now, of course, my lesson is to not take it all so damn seriously and just allow myself to accept that the decision I made, like I made that decision for whatever reason, I made the decision, and to try to let go of regret, to let go of what is missing, to let go of what could be, and just be like, okay, this is this decision I made, and I'm just going to be happy with that, And I'm going to look to the bright side of it rather than the glass half empty. But if I zoom outside of my experience, I see, working with people, there is a lot of this kind of self-punishment that goes on. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have made that decision. I shouldn't have asked that girl or guy out. I shouldn't have, said that. I shouldn't have done that. There's all this, I shouldn't, or I should have. And whenever those words come up for me, that's always kind of I don't want to call it a red flag, but it's like a waving flag of attention. Because when we're in shoulds and shouldn'ts, we're in someone else's opinion. Whether that's a societal opinion, whether that's a parental or peer opinion, or it can be as big as, God or the universe, right? Likewise, there's also this thing that I notice around that almost like the decisions are being made by God or the universe, but they don't make any sense, and they feel more like a punishment of like, why would the universe dangle that in front of my nose and then take it away? So like a good example of that for me was I, traveling down to where I am now, I needed to find another place over Easter. And the place that I had booked for the whole month of April, she had contacted me and said, oh, I've had a cancellation. Would you like to come a few days earlier? And I said, yes, let me just figure out what the date is. Now, it would have been really lovely had she just booked out those dates on Airbnb. She's already made her money. She's not going to lose money because she had a non-refundable cancellation policy. And she could have just blocked it out for me, but she didn't. And so then when I came back with a date, she said, oh, I can't believe it. Someone's just booked it. And I'm like, what is the point of that, universe? Why? Why did you send it? Like, that would have been so easeful. I would have only had to move like one more time instead of 3 times. Why would you dangle the carrot and then pull the rug from under my feet? And I think there's this kind of relationship of the why, the questioning, why? Why would the universe do that to me? Why would God do that to me? Or why would that happen? And in that, there's this sense of powerlessness, of I have zero power. And you could say in one way, like, yeah, we don't have so much power. We don't have so much control in the way that we perceive or want to have control, like knowing what the outcome is going to be, having it go exactly the way that we want it to be, having the expectation and the expectation met. I'm learning in my years that, God, there's so much surrender. There's so much softening. There's so much not taking things so seriously. There's getting out of this whole frame and context and paradigm of that there is right, wrong, good, bad, praise, punishment. You did it right. You got it wrong. The universe is going to praise you. It's going to punish you. Getting out of that whole thing. And I recognize it with my clients in so many different ways. And from the outside looking in, I go, oh, wow, that's a lot of self-judgment. And that's even a lot of judgment around the universe. Like, what if it all, as I've spoken to many times before, what if it's all just an experience and it just is, and we're the ones that give it meaning? We can take something and see it as, okay, it's just that. And especially when it comes to dating and things not going right, like that person not responding or not wanting to go on a second date, there's a lot that comes up around rejection, because for the ego, it doesn't feel good. Right? But actually, if we're really looking at, well, I want to be with the right person for me, that is harmonious and alignment, you don't want someone that doesn't want you. Why would we want that? That's the ego that's like, I want everyone to love me. I don't want to ever be rejected. Instead of actually just being with the feeling of like, well, that doesn't feel nice. Rejection doesn't feel nice. And even, is it rejection, or is that just our judgment? Is that our projection of, we feel rejected, and so therefore we believe we are being rejected, but maybe that person, well, there's whatever, there can be numerous reasons. And so this is why I tend to begin from a place of don't take it personal. And even if it is personal, it's not really any of my business, you know? And if that person doesn't like me or doesn't want me, for an example, well, then they're not the right person, so move on. But we take things very seriously, and we make stories about what it means. And it feeds into our belief systems, most especially, obviously, our limiting belief systems. And then through the story and the self-rejection, the self-abandoning, the self-judgment, we suffer. We suffer. And I always come back to like, well, do we need to suffer? So even in my situation where I struggle with decisions, I woke up with like this searing pain in the middle of the night. I'm not kidding, like a searing emotional pain of like, why? Why did I make that decision? Why didn't I make the other decision? Like with this place that I'm moving into, I walked past it the other day and it's like in the middle of the old town, and I'm not going to be able to park remotely nearby. And my car is such a symbol of freedom. And you know, you might go from the outside, oh God, that's not a big deal. But it's like, okay, every time I do my groceries, I'm going to have to bring a backpack and I'm going to have to walk it in. Little things like that, where it's like, this is going to make my life so much harder. And I've got a kid and I'm the only adult, you know? And so, but what was getting me was the regret, like, why did I do that? And so I was lying in bed going, okay, show me why I did make the decision that I made. Show me what the learning is in this. What am I learning in this experience? Show me, I was speaking to a client and I was like, well, okay, this scenario played out and it feels familiar to what happened in the past. But how are you different in it this time? Oh, this time I didn't take it as personal. Great, there's your evolution. That's a great discovery. So it's not for null, right? Every time we have an experience that maybe doesn't go the way that we wanted it to go, or maybe we feel like we didn't get it right and we got it wrong, or maybe we did something and we feel humiliated or embarrassed or rejected. there's always something that we can take from it. There's always a point of reflection, and there's always an invitation for growth. There's always a lesson that we can choose to take from it. Now, here's another thing. If we hand over the power, all the power to the universe to go, okay, what is the universe teaching me here? And normally that's like, I'm being punished. I've done something wrong, and it's teaching me something. It's like being a school kid, right? And that is heavily indoctrinated through us, through education, through old-fashioned parenting, and through religion. I don't want to poo-poo religion. I just think it's when something becomes dogma and indoctrinated and in an organization. I'm not talking about the essence of what that religion stands for, which to me, if it's about unconditional love, beautiful. If it's not about unconditional love, then it's been manipulated and it's not genuine. But that's just my perspective and my opinion. I base everything on, is it true unconditional love or not? It's very simple. So we have this relationship then to life of being kind of like a school kid, right? Or being a child, rather than going, I'm in this crazy simulation. My soul has chosen this. My soul wants to learn certain things. It wants to grow in a certain way. It's all very interesting and exciting, even though for the human, it might feel a bit dramatic and exhausting and hard sometimes. The soul is like, woo, this is cool. But there's always an opportunity. We get to choose. What do I want to learn from this? What do I want to take from this situation? How do I want to reflect upon this? And again, there's no test, there's no exam. You don't need to get a passing grade. But what is it that you want to take from it so that you can learn to either do it differently next time, or to go, oh, I did do it differently this time, and that feels really good. Oh, I am growing. That's lovely. Like, we never pat ourselves on the back for things, right? We should more often, because it's a really important part of this process. So in my position right now, I kind of thought, sorry, I need to close a window because it's actually getting very windy. I'm looking at myself and I thought, oh man, I thought I learned this after the Mexico experience and not taking the direct flight, that like, oh, how much I value my experience and, for things to be easeful. And if I can actually just put in a couple €100 more, it's actually worth it. And I'm like, shit, I just did it again. I just literally did it again. I stopped myself from having, what could have been a really lovely experience because I was coming from scarcity. And so I was beating myself up about getting it wrong. I was beating myself up about regretting the experience that I could have had, right? So, okay, I thought, didn't I learn that? And it's like, clearly not. Okay, so how can I be compassionate with myself? Because I can be hard on myself too. I can definitely be hard on myself, especially when it comes to decisions, because that's like a little bit my Achilles heel. How can I be compassionate? How can I be gentle? How can I just let it go and not take it so seriously? And you know what? There might be some things about this place that I'm moving into that are going to be inconvenient, but you know what? I'll adapt. But as long as I keep on making the comparison, as long as I keep on thinking that like, what if and what am I missing out on, I am creating suffering for myself. As long as I keep on telling myself, oh, Corinne, you made the wrong decision. You should have made that decision. Who knows what would have happened if I had made that decision? Maybe there would have been other issues there, because here's the thing, there is no perfect. And so it's part of my perfectionism that is upset with me, right? And it's like, okay, I got to unlearn the perfectionism and just let it go and let it be, because at the end of the day, this is just an experience. It's just a wild ride of an experience, and we get to give it meaning. But I see this as people are moving through, especially if it's like there are big decisions to be made. There are things that are really important. And of course, the more important something is, the more value we give it, the greater the risk. So when it comes to, I would say, the three main areas around relationship, where one lives and what one does, with career or purpose, that the stakes are higher because they mean a lot to us. And I suppose also in our society, there's a certain kind of criteria or meaning or level of importance with those things. For some, not for everyone, but I would say in general as a societal norm, even though I don't like using that word. So the higher the stakes, the greater the risk, the harder we're going to be on ourselves. And I think it's recognizing there is no perfect person. There is no perfect job. There is no perfect house or place. Everything has its pros and cons. And everything at the end of the day is just an experience, and we get to choose what we make out of it, right? And what we take from it, and how we grow through it, and what we learn, and that helps us to evolve. But I just keep on coming back to it's so simple of just, how can I be kind and compassionate with myself? How can I soften? How can I let go of having control? How can I let go of just this? We really have to learn this right and wrong, this should and shouldn't, the black and white. I think even, I grew up in alternative schooling, but even then, it's still like it's been plugged into us generation after generation after generation for thousands of years. And I think part of this big shift that we're going through is just the crumbling and the letting go of some very old paradigms and some very old ways of thinking. But when we're in the transition and we're crossing the bridge, it's almost like the juxtaposition between the old and the new becomes very confronting, and we oscillate between the both because we're kind of used to the old, but we don't want to do it that way anymore. But we don't really know what the new is like because we're actually building the bridge as we cross the river. It's not there. We're building it as we go. And it's easy to compare, whether it's within ourselves or to others or to, again, a societal criteria or norm. It's easy to compare, and it's easy to measure and judge ourselves by that criteria. And I think the invitation is come back to yourself, come back to your heart. Can we learn to trust ourselves? And I know I come back to trust a lot, but actually this time I'm really going to bring it down to, can we trust ourselves? Because it's great to have a relationship with the universe or God or spirit or the creator of all that is, whatever you want to call it. But we have to understand that we also are that. So it's not something that's outside of us. It's not something that's bigger and better than us. It is a part of us. We are a reflection and an expression of that. So we're here in partnership. We are co-creating. And we've got to stop handing over so much power. I don't care if you look at it spiritually or religiously or any other way. The moment that we give something outside of us more power than us, we've lost our sovereignty, we've lost our inner authority, we've lost our inner creativity, because we're saying, oh, life is happening to me, not through and with me. And that's a very big difference. It's a similar energetic shift to having an intention versus an expectation. An expectation is very rigid, is very defined, is very locked in, and so normally we get disappointed because it's very narrow. An intention is open, it's breathable. It's connected to the heart, it's connected to the desire, it's connected to the want, but then you let it go. And the analogy that I used in a session today was like, it's a dandelion, right? Before it turns into a dandelion, the puffy things. For some reason, I can't think of the name. Is it a dandelion or is it something else? And you make a wish and you blow, and all the little pieces float in the air and you let it go. That's what life is kind of like, right? You can have the intention, you can have the vision, you can have what your heart desires, but you blow it out and you let it go into the wind. And then you got to trust that the partnership that you are in with life, with God, with the universe, with spirit, with the collective, with your higher self, it's all a partnership because it's all interconnected. It's all one. You got to trust that you're in that dance, you're in that partnership. And I think it's very easy because of our conditioning that sometimes we feel abandoned, we feel let down, we feel rejected, we feel unwanted, we feel, I think the let down, it's like we see the universe or God as the parent. Oh, my parent let me down. My parent abandoned me. My parent rejected me. But actually, when it comes to existence, we're on equal ground. We're on equal ground. And I think the shift that's happening now is to recognize that we are in harmony in this partnership. It's not an us against them, me against some greater power that is going to tell me if I'm living my life right or wrong, if I'm getting it right or wrong. That's going to punish me if I don't quite get it right? It's all perspective. Perspective is massive. I can kind of I mean, I don't know what the answer to it is, but with the scenario with like, oh, I could have had that place a couple days early and it would have relieved a lot of stress and saved me some money and effort and energy. And then it kind of, the rug gets pulled under my feet. And it's like, well, why? I could go into the why and feel like, well, that's just mean. That's cruel. The universe is mean, or unfair. Or there's so many reasons that we could say that life is unfair and unjust. But in reality, it just is. And why do those things happen? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that yet. It's like some people say, oh, shit happens. But maybe it's again, if we get out of the good, bad, right, wrong, and it just is, maybe it's letting go of our emotional attachment, our emotional judgment of what that is and how that affected us. And maybe the true resilience that we need is just not being so battered around by experience, by circumstance. I know that Joe Dispenza talks a lot about that. He says, well, don't let, if you are so greatly affected by what someone says or does or something in the environment, you are not in I don't know the word that he uses, but you are at the mercy of your environment, rather than being quote unquote in control of it. I don't like the word control because of the connotation. But what I like is the word of, are we engaged? Are we engaged, or are we at the mercy at? Are we engaged, or is the tail wagging the dog? But I think part of being engaged is we've got to have a loose, soft grip. We can't have a tight grip. And we can't expect. It's like we can get very stubborn in our ways of being. We can get very judgmental in our ways of being. And so as I grow older and I'm going through this experience, and especially right now, this journey that I'm on, it's like, wow, I feel like this whole open, soften, let go, surrender, open, soften, let go, surrender, trust. It's this softening, 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 softening. And when I get hard and when I want to go into control and when I want to get it right, it's more painful. It's much more painful. Now, anything in life takes courage. Anything in life takes a certain amount of energy and effort. There's a certain element of risk because it's all vulnerable and it's all stepping into an unknown. No matter how much we try to know it and predict it and plan it in advance, it's still a massive unknown. But I think the more that we can come into that present moment and trust, even with our eyes closed, that's when we can fall into a greater fluidity of life. We can fall into a greater harmony. And even when things get hard and there is a challenge and there is extra effort and there is stamina that's needed, there's still that feeling of fluidity because we're not gripping it. We're not trying to force it to be something. But I go back to what I have said so many times. I think the biggest thing that we're needing to learn to let go of right now is judgment. Whether we're judging ourselves, whether we believe the universe or God is judging us, whether we believe other people are judging us, it's like letting go of the judgment. You cannot get it right, nor can you get it wrong. You cannot succeed, nor can you fail. It's just an experience. So this feeling of not getting it right, but what is right? By whose standards is it right? And a lot of the times, it might actually be our own standards. What is it within me that feels like I have to get it right? What is it in me that judges myself if I don't get it right? What is it in me that judges if I feel life doesn't get it right for me? The universe didn't get it right for me. Why did it set me up in that and then pull, it's still coming from judgment. So that's why I think we need to pay attention even. I know it can be semantics, but it's like paying attention to our vocabulary. What are the words that we're using? What's the energy behind them? What is the definition, the connotation, the meaning that we give them? And again, the invitation will come back and just be like, let go, come back into the present moment, face what is in front of you without all the story. The story complicates. And you know what? That's part of being human, right? So maybe let your ego go with the story for a little bit, but recognize it for what it is. And also recognize that because we're human, because we have an ego, like some things are going to feel uncomfortable, or some things are going to be like, ouch, that hurts. The feeling of being rejected, the feeling of getting it wrong, the feeling of regret doesn't feel comfortable, but it's just a feeling and it will pass like the clouds pass through the sky. It doesn't have to mean anything about you and your worth and life and God and the universe. It doesn't have to mean any of that. It can just be an uncomfortable experience, and then you move through it. And I think this is where the courage and the resilience to just be so present and in the moment comes, is just let yourself feel what you're moving through. Give yourself the permission to really feel it, not reject it, not deny it, not ignore it, neglect it, resist it. Don't go into tension, go into relaxation, feel it, move through it, then you can let it go. Then you'll be on the other side of it. And it takes courage, because at times it's going to feel uncomfortable. But the beautiful part is that when we move through our fear, we feel so much more liberated the next time. When we soften our judgment, we feel so much more empowered, more whole, more filled with love, because we're not being mean to ourselves. We're not being mean to the universe in a way. We're not in an argument. We're not in a conflict, whether it's within ourselves or with the universe or with God or with someone else. As within, so without, as above, so below. So I think we're learning how to be at peace with our experience. Whoa, how to be at peace with our experience. I think that's a big one. So that means letting go of the story and the judgment and the beliefs and the right and the wrongs and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and opinions and criteria. How can we just be at peace with what is? And if you're not at peace with what is, okay, sit with that. Breathe into it. Be with it. Feel the feelings. And then just come back into that allowing, accepting. Shift the perspective. Shift the perspective if you're in a story. Shift the perspective if you go into victimization. Shift the perspective if you go into judgment. Come back to what is. Hold it with compassion. Be kind to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. There is no perfect. And you know what? Sometimes maybe we make mistakes. That's okay too. That's okay too. Maybe sometimes we don't, quote unquote, get it right. But it doesn't mean we got it wrong. It's all just an experience. We can make a different choice next time. We can fine-tune the recipe. We can pay more attention to what we value, what has meaning for us, what's important. Where do we still need to support ourselves more? Where do we still need to love ourselves more? Where do we still need to let go of the story and the old belief and the insecurity and the lack of self-worth? And it's all a learning experience, but not because someone is teaching us a lesson and therefore praising or reprimanding us. It's all a learning experience because we get to choose to take it as something to learn and grow through. I hope that makes sense. I'll leave it at that. The invitation, because I like to leave it with an invitation. How can you soften your heart when you're in a situation that feels uncomfortable? How can you soften your heart when you're in a situation that feels uncomfortable and you want to get hard and you want to protect and you want to fight against and resist, or you might be in a kind of like, I don't want this. I want it to be that way. There's the stubbornness. There's the wanting to change your reality. Well, the way to change your reality is within your experience, and your experience changes by how you perceive it. So I might have said this last week. We see based on what we know, and if you want to change what you see, you have to change what you know. It's all about perception. So what would it be like to perceive our experience through the eyes of love, through the eyes of kindness, through the eyes of compassion? And not just the eyes, but the state of being. And I believe that's how we'll find peace. All right. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.